So anyway, the campaign itself was an urban campaign. It was set in a gigantic city state, which I named Vancia for reasons. And I decided about 6 months into running the campaign that one of the things that I had always wanted to do was to draw like a really good, intense, gigantic city map. And it's going to be hard to get the whole thing in frame, but I decided to make it basically 4 sheets of paper and have finished 2 quadrants of the city. And I'm gonna let me zoom in a little bit so that you can kind of get a sense of the scale that I work on. Um, so uh, there you go. I don't know how good that looks. It does have a little bit of trouble zooming in at that level. That's okay. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of the level of detail I work at. I work really tiny, which is just something that I have always done. Did I just crash my camera? No. Okay. So anyway, let's back out a little bit. Okay, that seems to be a good zoom right there. Okay, so yeah, no, that's just a natural thing. I have always had really tiny handwriting and really fine levels of detail, which is not necessary. I mean, you can work at whatever scale you want, and I'm going to actually go through like the process that I've been following. Now that I'm not a professional mapster, as it were. This is all just me kind of over the years. I like hand drawing maps and um, got a little crazy with it. And this is the biggest project I've ever undertaken. But you can see here. Okay, let's. I guess let me talk first about the stuff I use. Okay, so underneath here, which we're gonna come back to in a second, I actually have a light table. Okay, and a light table it's a flat surface that will shine a light up from underneath, which you can use to trace. And you can see that underneath there is actually, yeah, R.L. Ritchie is saying, is cartographer the word you're looking for? Yeah, it is. Um, I guess, so, you know what? I kind of actually have a little bit of a funny issue calling the people who make RPG maps cartographers, because to me, a cartographer is like Amerigo Vespucci, someone who like mapped something for real and did surveys and all of that crap. What we're doing is we're just drawing. We're imagining shit. So I don't know if cartographer is really the set of skills that are involved here. Because a cartographer is actually concerned about accurately representing what exists in the real world, and a fantasy map maker is concerned about making a map that is evocative and interesting and all of that crap. And I don't have to worry that my river that flows through my city does not accurately map a real river that's out there in the real world. So, but anyway, I'm not a professional mapster. I am purely an amateur. And if you look really closely at my stuff, it's got issues. It's got some crap to it. Um, and yeah, there's some problems with it. But anyway, so first of all, let me kill that for a second. There is absolutely nothing I can do. There is always going to be with the light table, because it kind of flickers on and off. There's always going to be a little bit of an issue with the refresh rate on the camera kind of missing it. So I can't do anything about that flicker. Okay. Mainly I use mechanical pencils, and they're all pretty much the same. I prefer point 0.5 millimeter because I get a really good fine line. Um, and then for the actual inking, I love these, again, these fine tip Sharpie pens, which is basically just, it's a Sharpie pen with a really fine 0.5 millimeter tip again, which is important to me because I work with really fine lines. A lot of people will use 0.7 millimeter lead for their pencils and, 0.7 millimeter lead ink pens or whatever, which is totally fine. But because I work at such a tiny scale, I have to go with much finer lead, or else the line would be too thick. There's a couple other things I have that are important. Obviously, you're going to want to always have a ruler if you're mapping, because you don't want to rely on yourself to do all the straight lines. Now that said, one of the reasons to do hand maps, or maps by hand, which I have to, holy crap, like it's such an ingrained habit. I talk with my hands so that I actually have to put my hand on the camera, under the camera, so that I can illustrate when I say draw by hand. I mean this thing here with the fingers coming off of it. That is a hand, people. Okay. So, now the thing is, one of the I kind of got sidetracked. One of the reasons I prefer to work by hand is because it's got a little bit of a sloppy look to it. And, once I start working at scale, you'll see what I mean. But, like, I don't use a straight edge to draw the buildings. And I'm going to move the camera closer when I actually start fine working. But, because I kind of like that sort of sloppy, like, look that it was done by hand. I mean, that's what you want to do. I don't like the way computer maps look. They look too perfect. And I want something that when my players see it, it's like, okay, this could be an artifact from the world. It's like this, if a really good magical cartographer was making a map of this city, this is what it would look like. I like that look. But I do have a straight edge because, as you can see, things like city walls and the canals, you do kind of want them to come out straight, because if you try to draw a straight line by hand over any sort of a long distance, it's going to look really crappy. So the other thing I have along the same lines is this thing is called a variable curve, and it is basically just where? Okay. Right. Why am I having so much trouble finding the camera? It is directly pointed at the light table. The light table is my frame. Okay, so this is a variable curve. It's marked out as a ruler, but it basically just wobbles, like you can bend it and it holds a shape. So if you wanted to draw a line, you could bend it into a shape, draw the line, and then draw a parallel line to it. So it allows you to maintain a shape other than a straight edge. I don't actually use it that often, but I always wanted to own one, so it gave me a good excuse. This is a protractor. You probably worked with these in like high school geometry or middle school geometry. As you're going to see when I start doing like the towers of the city walls, it's actually kind of important to have that. Again, because I do want the city walls and the canals and stuff to come to nice intersections, and that's why you use this. I don't actually use it all that much, but when I do use it, it's important. For the same reason, when you're doing like repetitive stuff, having a circle template is really good. Circle template is just just a piece of plastic with all these particular circles in them. And if you look, you can actually see that each of the circles has like a crosshair for it, so that you can kind of line it up along lines and find the center of the circle. That's really useful. Working in pencil, you're going to need a good erasers that really clean up the, because you end up drawing a lot in pencil. But so, like, some people prefer like the Papermate, the white pearl erasers. This is just a simple white gum eraser. I don't use the putty eraser. Some people swear by those. Putty eraser is actually, it's more like silly putty, and you can mold it into a shape so that you can erase really fine lines. But I tend to erase in bulk. It's like I'll draw all my pencil lines and then I'll go over it and just get rid of all the pencil lines. And I actually prefer the Papermate black pearl erasers. And I like the shape on these better because I find that it's easier to go over a big area with them. Finally, there's this. This is a little whiteout pen, okay? Because once you start inking, you're eventually going to make a mistake. And this is the way to cover mistakes, okay? It's basically just, I don't know. I'll demonstrate it later, I'm sure. But it's important to have it because we work in pencil and then we ink in pen. Well, ink in ink. But once you start inking, when you fuck up, there's no going back from that. Okay. So, as far as planning the city goes, if you are ever going to run any campaign in a city, the thing I can't recommend enough is Cityscape. This was a D&D source book for 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. It was by Ari Marmel and someone named C.A. Suleiman. I don't know that person. And David Noonan did some additional design. David Noonan is like a personal hero of mine, so every time I say his name, it gives me a little thing. And Ari Marmel actually saw me tweeting some of the images from this city map and my referencing Cityscape, and wants a copy of the city when it's done. And I said I would totally do that, because one of the plans is when I get this city done, I'm going to find someone with better Photoshop skills than me to take good, and I'm going to get good, solid, clean scans of all 4 pages, and I'm going to have them put it together and clean up the edges. Because as it stands right now, the edges, as nice and clean as I've tried to keep them, they've gotten frayed. This project is something that I work on just in my spare time. It's not something that, has to be done. So it's something that I've been working on off and on for about a year and a half. And I find it very relaxing. Now, I don't have my other important supply, so I'm making do. Normally, I will have, normally I have vodka. And now, that's not as much of a joke as it may seem. When you're working with really, really tiny lines and you want to get things dead on, one of the things that's kind of important to do is to relax and not have handshakes, so that you can work at a really tiny scale. And I find that one cocktail helps kind of get the tension out of my muscles, so that, because I do have the handshakes. So, but right now I have tea. I've been drinking tea at night, not caffeinated. It's green tea. But no, seriously, I am saying, it's good to have a little bit of just something to relax you in you. Don't drink too much, because if you actually get inebriated, it's going to really wreck your maps. So, one of the things that Cityscape does is it actually tells you how to build a city in terms of districts. Okay, and there was actually, shortly thereafter, and when I put this on the website, because I'm going to put this whole video up on YouTube, but they came out with a web enhancement for Cityscape called Building a City, which then expanded on the list of districts. And this is actually kind of a really useful thing. You probably can't read it, but it divides the type of city up into different neighborhoods. Okay, so for example, fine shops. Shopping districts such as this one often feature storefronts of interest to adventurers. The city's best armorers, weaponsmiths, sages, and magic dealers offer their services here. Then it gives a list of the type and number of buildings you would expect in that neighborhood. So this tells me that, you would have 4 upscale lodgings, 6 upscale food, 10 exotic trades, 30 upscale trades, and 20 upscale residences. And you know what? That information is utterly useless, because let's be honest, when you map out a city, you are not actually trying to decide what every freaking building is. Okay? That would be ludicrous. But it is a good idea to get a sense of what buildings sort of get clumped together. One of the other neat things about Cityscape is that for each of the neighborhoods, and by the way, there is a list, this same list exists in the Cityscape book, it's just not as extensive. It's got a smaller list of districts. Actually, wait, I take that back. No, this is something you want to get from the web enhancement. And as far as I know, the web enhancement is still there. And if the web enhancement isn't still there, I'm going to go ahead and say, I'll go ahead and scan the hell out of my printout, and I will make it available, because this thing is super useful. Because the other thing is, it gives this little section called First Impression. where it gives you just a little bit of flavor text about what the neighborhood would be like. So when you're walking through the fine shops, it's the hubbub of commerce is omnipresent here, but the high prices discourage the crowds found in the less toney shopping districts. Less toney? Less tunny. Huh, I don't know what that is. So in the Lord's Keep neighborhood, pennants in the city's colors flutter over the castle, and guards eye the street from their watchtowers above. Soldiers drill in the courtyard beyond the open drawbridge. So you get all this little flavor text. It's because as the party is then traveling through a city, and they decide, oh, we have to go and visit the Enchanters Guild, which is obviously going to be in the Magic District. So you say, oh, you walk across the city and finally make your way until you come to the place, which is obviously the Magic District, and continual flames illuminate the streets, and entertaining artistic illusions decorate some of the buildings. The berobed citizens frequently display flashy magic, typically glamours. Useful magic items abound. And then you just have this flavor text at your fingertips. Now, obviously, that's most useful if you're running an urban campaign. So one of the things I did was I decided about, I actually sat and laid out the entire city by its districts. Okay, and all I really did, this is the southwest quadrant of the city. So you can kind of see how I did this here. So number one, I figured out, I drew the coastlines just because I knew it was a coastal city. And then on top of that, then I laid out the walls. I just decided, okay, those are the boundaries of the city. Now, it's a little bit ridiculous to do the walls next, because obviously the walls are shaped by the growth of the city, but whatever. We're not trying to build accurate, we're trying to build awesome. And then in green, kind of hard to see now, but in green, I laid out the main roads. Okay, so these are the main thoroughfares, which tend to either connect districts or run between them. And then once I did that, I also added canals. That was just a feature I decided that my city had, was it has 2 aqueducts and canals. Because the west side there's actually a whole history of the city too, which I'll talk about in time. But so I laid out the whole city in terms of that, and just for my reference, I did take a scan of the whole thing, and because here you go. So this is actually a map of, we'll just lay it down flat. This is actually a map of every neighborhood in the city. Okay, including some of the prominent stuff, because obviously there's prominent landmarks. This city is based on the idea of a free city-state that is run by 7 different magical guilds. I think there were 7 in the beginning. 7 different magical guilds, and each guild was going to have kind of a guild house or location in the city, and they were all vying for control. It was an urban intrigue campaign, which based on player characters who could not die and kept coming back to life. So I laid out the entire city like that and did it on graph paper, okay, which is what you see here. And then you might notice, I'm going to try to hold this up. See, in the arena neighborhood there, there. Okay, because I'm holding it up, it's kind of hard to spot. So in the arena neighborhood, you might notice that there are some pencil lines. And also, I'm going to flip this around. Also in the Inn and Tavern district, you'll notice the little pencil lines. That was me testing to see how big a city block should be. Okay, because I actually put way more thought into this city than there needed to be. So, based on the little population demographics, 'cause 3rd edition was obsessed with population demographics. Remember the DM's guide, how it would tell you in this neighborhood or in this city you had 40% elves and 20% dwarves and the rest were humans, and it had exactly this much gold, and there were and then it told you how to generate how many commoners were in the city and how many 7th level fighters were in the city. And it was utterly absurd. But one of the things this little thing does tell you is about how many buildings you would expect in a neighborhood. Okay? And that also varies by population density. Because, again, I'm like obsessive. I'm obsessed with detail. And you can kind of see that. Like, you can see how the population density of an area like these slums and warrens, you can see how closely packed everything is there compares to a more middle-class residential neighborhood, or compares to like an upper-class neighborhood. Notice how much bigger and more spread out the buildings are. Okay, this is just all stuff that sort of informed me as I was drawing. Tabertson is saying, what was the packet called? The packet is called Building a City, a Web Enhancement for the Dungeon Master's Guide version 3.5. Actually, Building a City Web Enhancement. I might actually have the link here, and I'll post it into the chat. Yeah, holy shit. It's still there. There's a link in the chat. And honestly, with that, you don't really need Cityscape, but Cityscape is a neat book to have apart from that. I just kind of, I find that the two books work well together, but I'm also going to, and Cityscape also has a whole bunch of, oh, I'm looking at the stream instead of my camera. That's why I can't see what's going on. There we go. Cityscape also does have a bunch of neat example cities. It talks about how cities work. It's a guide to running adventures in cities and even like urban campaigns. It goes into more detail about the different neighborhoods. And it gets rid of some of the really dense numerical stuff. But I liked both of them. There's also some random encounter tables. And then, of course, because it was a 3rd edition source book, it also had to include new feats, new prestige classes, new spells, because, of course, there's a whole section on politics, on guilds. And it's one of those books that's really, 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 really setting neutral, or system neutral. The mechanics are there, but the thing itself is very much edition neutral. So once I laid out all the major stuff, then I took it and tacked it down. I'm just going to peel one of the bits of tape here so that you can see that underneath there, which shines through the light table, is actually the original layout of the city. And I also have the master reference so that I can always see what's going on. From that point on, it was just a matter of I would sit down and start working on a particular area of the city and just decide what I wanted to do with it. And most of the actual details of the city, and actually I'm going to drop the camera down at this point so that we can work a little bit closer up. So just bear with me a second. Things are going to get a little bit crazy. Whoa, and oh, hey, I cut my hand, by the way. I got to move this big crate of Legos, which I was using as an extra tripod. Here we go, and zoom out, and will the autofocus now work? Seems to be working. I think it's about the best we're gonna get. All right, so now I'm working in a bit of a smaller area, because we're gonna start doing some detail, and I'm gonna just cannot sit the camera. I apologize if you're prone to motion sickness. I'm gonna do the best I can. But one of the things I'm going to find is that you really, or one of the things you're going to find is how much I move shit around while I draw. Because I'm going to let you in on a few mapping secrets that nobody else will tell you, because they're not actually about mapping so much as about using your friggin' hands. That's the biggest thing you got to learn. So, for example, when you draw, I'm right-handed, obviously, and if this is left-handed, everything is going to be backwards. But when you draw, because of the way your wrist is wired, you tend to move in sort of this way. So when you draw a line, you're gonna it's gonna be oriented like that. The other thing you can do is you can pull a line by pulling your hand this way. So those are really the two directions that you're going to draw in. So that it's very important for you not to try and rotate your hand. Oh, I got to draw over here. I'm going to like lay across my thing and do this. That'll drive you nuts. So even if you don't have something as cool as a light table, which by the way was a Christmas present that my mother got me after I got started with this project, and she realized that I was kind of getting obsessive about it and that it would make my life a lot easier, which was really cool of the angry mom. But I'm actually going to see if I can... Whoops, sorry. See if I can get the camera to... No, I can't. Okay. I was actually trying to see if I could get the camera to hang out a little bit more over the map, but I can't. So we're just going to have to deal with what we got. All right. So, also, this is a European light table, which you can tell because it's all marked out in centimeters. But anyway, so the point is, whatever you're working on, if you're going to draw something that you really want to show off, because obviously, if you're just doodling a map for your own notes or your own work or your own edification, you're just going to scribble it out. No big deal. Even my, like, DMing dungeon maps are, you know, like, a lot of them I just sort of fart out, you know. But if I'm doing something that I either want people to look at or I'm going to show off, then you've got to kind of go the extra distance, which is why... And I always sort of knew... Like, I tend to work on... I'll give you an example. Okay, so this is one of my more detailed dungeon maps for personal use. And even that is just... That's a little bit more obsessive than I usually go. Trying to find. Here's another one. Here's a keep. Okay, and you can see that that's kind of just thrown together. You know, I mean, it's still. I can't not put a level of work into this stuff because I love it, but at the same time, you know, that's pretty slapdash. I didn't go crazy with it. This is a city map I made for a friend. It kind of lies at the base of a mountain, so you've got these two ridges that come off the mountain, and there's some stuff built up on the mountain and some roads that run along the mountain, and there's the arena on this raised area with bridges to it. And again, because I was doing this for a friend for her to use in her campaign, I wanted it to look really good, and so I put a lot of work in. And if you look really closely right here, let's see if the zoom will actually work. Open. I don't know why the camera thing went away, but here we go. Let's see if I can... Alright, it's a little bit fuzzy, but it's not bad. Okay. So where is it? Right here. That's whiteout. That was crap, is what happened there. And then this is another unfinished map that I've been working on for a while. This was a project for a campaign that unfortunately didn't last. And it was basically like a northern, sort of a Skyrim type setup. Well, sort of a Skyrim type setup. So I was playing around with, you know, overland pencils and coniferous forests and things like volcanic plains and sulfur lakes and stuff like that. And I did it all in black and white because I thought that would be better. And eventually I was going to fill in the rest. And I'm going to finish it someday. But the point is, if you're working on doing a map that you're going to show off and you're going to put that level of work into it, tape it down. Tape it down to a surface that you can work, that you can move on. Yes, absolutely, Odog Fjords. Lovely fjords. I'm always pining for the fjords in my role-playing games. So, get a board of wood. And I'll recommend the absolute best thing you can get to do this mapping shit is go to Home Depot and pick up a piece of like Formica shelving, which I'm going to illustrate with my hands here as something that's squarish. Get a piece of Formica shelving, because it's got a nice smooth surface. And then you can just use Scotch tape to tape down the map. When you use Scotch tape, by the way, to tape down your map, you want to do very, very small bits of tape, small squares of tape that you can then easily peel or cut away. Otherwise, you run the risk of tearing your map. Also, I would recommend that you use good quality paper, which I don't. This paper literally comes out of my printer. This is the same shit I print on. So, because, you know, I'm a peasant. Like I said, I'm not a professional. But, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to start with, let's see. Let's find something to work on here. Let's bring up the light table. I'm trying to find, I was hoping there was a good spot to do city walls on there. Well, there sort of is. Okay. We're going to work on some city walls first because that's like the most meticulous part of it. That's the part where I really get mechanical, and then we'll sort of fill in. For tonight, I'm going to start working in a really simple area, and then as time goes on, we're going to work in more detail. So I'm going to kind of work on this side of the river here, and we're just going to do a little residential neighborhood. So we've got residential neighborhoods, some wealthy residents, parks, fine shops. We'll go ahead and work on this area. Probably from now, I'm probably going to hang out and do this for an hour to an hour and a half now that we're getting started. Okay. So, it might be, I'm actually going to turn down the light table for a minute, or turn it off, because it's kind of easier to see the pencil lines without it. Okay. So, if you look really closely at my city walls, you're going to notice that there's all of these guidelines. Okay. So that the city walls are the same width and the towers are the same height, what's the word for the thing across a circle when you measure across the friggin' diameter. Okay. And yeah, so and you can see, I think my city walls are actually because it's been a long time since I worked on this. So they're an 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, they're 1/8 of an inch wide. Okay, and the way it works is I start with a center line, and then sort of work my way out. So we're actually going to pick up on the other side of the river here, because it doesn't matter that the towers sort of interlock on the other side of the river. You know, they don't have to match up. When you're working with, when you're going from tower to tower, you know, everything's got to kind of line up. And I'm just kind of killing those grid lines, because you can see that there's a river here, and then there's the start of the wall on the other side, and there's nothing in the river. Okay, so we're actually gonna just pick a spot to start the first wall on, or start the first tower on, which is going to be kind of the first segment of wall is this. Turn it down dim. Things. Okay. So I'm actually going to work on this section of wall from this tower all the way through to this tower. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3 little sections of wall. I actually could shorten it a little bit if I wanted to, and I'm not going to go as far as the fortress yet. We'll save that for another night. Because again, we're going to do the residential districts, because that sort of stuff is easy and repetitive to get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the center line for my wall segment. And again, I'm not trying to get it dead on here, because the thing underneath is just sort of a sketch. Okay, so as long as it's there, it's good. And when you lay down guidelines, you want to work as light as you can, because you're going to have to erase those lines. And I'm sorry if it's going to be a little tough. I'm actually going to see if I can zoom in just a little bit. There we go. When you lay down guidelines, you want to be as light as possible, and you also want to go really, really long. Okay? And the reason for that is because the other thing we need, we need the centers of the towers, because we're going to be using our circle template, and the circle template relies on us knowing the two intersections on the center. So that's where we sort of get to our protractor, which requires us to have a nice long line. Okay. Now you can see that I'm lining up the dot on the protractor, or the starting point on the protractor, and the 90 degree angle on the protractor along my guideline, and that tells me where, so that means that my I don't think I drew my guideline long enough. All right, so trying to keep my big fat head out of the frame as I lean over this. So we're going to go ahead and draw a nice long guideline there. Okay. And I might have drawn it a little bit too dark, but it should be okay. Yeah, it's okay. So now I line up my protractor and decide that the first tower is just going to go right here. Bam. And now I've got, wow, that line is way too dark. I'm just going to erase that a little bit. It's been a long time since I did this. I used to have a much lighter touch. And then the second tower is pretty nearby. I'm actually going to draw it a little farther away than my initial sketch, but that's okay. And there you go. And so these are going to be the centers of the two towers with the wall in between it. Okay. Now, before we go any further, we want to keep working toward the next segment of the tower. So here's the center of the current tower there, right? And we want to work toward the next one. And at this point, as I'm looking at the way the city was sketched, I realize that there's sort of this little bowing in the wall where the wall kind of comes in. And I don't really like that. So I'm actually just going to decide, nope, there's just one nice long segment of wall between here and the fortress. So notice now that this line is the center line of the next segment of the wall, and it's going to intersect a tower there. So as I draw the walls, I stay like one tower ahead of the section of the wall that I'm working on. Now the other thing is that we know that the towers themselves are the wall itself is 1/8 of an inch wide. So I then am going to take my ruler and lay it down along the center line of the tower. I got to move a little bit of light here. Okay. It's a little. I'm trying to avoid bumping the camera, and the angle at which I'm working is a little tricky. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to either side of the tower wall, the center line for the wall, and I'm just going to mark. That's where either side of the tower is going to be, right? Or either side of the city wall is going to be. And then we're going to do the same thing down here. So we lay the ruler along and we figure out where the sides of the tower are going to be. So now I can by connecting those points that I've made, and you can see that I wasn't quite dead on because of a thing called parallax. Parallax is your biggest enemy when you are working with rulers and straight edges, which is why I always work ahead a couple of towers so that the error doesn't last too long. Hey, Buckaroo Popcorn. Because parallax, by the way, refers to the fact that the farther away you are from something, the more things look like they line up. Like, when things are close together, it's easy to tell whether they're aligned. So just the height of a ruler, if you're not directly above the ruler and oriented perfectly, is enough to kind of throw off where your lines are. It generally isn't a big deal because you don't usually work at that sort of fine detail. And again, we're also willing to be a little sloppy about things. And I am just going to drop the center of the other tower there. Same deal again. That's the center of the tower. We're going to measure out the width of the wall at the center of that tower. Bam and bam. And then we are going to connect the city walls, so that the city walls have the appearance of a uniform width all along. Okay? The Immortal DM is saying one could argue that naturally built structures aren't always straight. That is true, but remember this is a map of naturally built structures, and people tend to assume that they were straight and will draw them accordingly. So now we can go ahead, and I can't remember how big my towers were. Okay, I think they were 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, so the towers use the 1/4 of an inch circle. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to put down the towers where they go. And it's probably a little bit hard to see, again, because I'm working with thin pencil lines. But you're basically lining up the crosshairs on the circle template with the guidelines for the center of the tower. And we're just going to drop a circle. And then, because the inside of the tower, because I was giving the towers some thickness, notice. So we're going to go ahead and drop down to a 3/16 circle. You might ask, why 3/16? Because why the fuck not? And you're also going to notice that this too is a little bit off. But when I come back in with the pen, you're going to see why that's kind of okay. And again, like I said, we do want sort of a sloppiness to this. And we're going to go ahead and drop the other tower. And we'll go ahead and drop the other tower. Bam. Okay. So now, assuming we like the way all of that looks, and I guess we'll go ahead and do one more here. Even though I'm not actually going to ink. Well, I'm going to have to ink this tower, aren't I? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we're gonna have to ink this tower too, but that's okay because this tower cuts off at a fortress or a gate. So you might notice here. I'm just gonna move this a little bit. So here's an example of a city gate, where I basically instead of connecting up the wall nice and neat, I left a space in the wall and just kind of drew in this little structure here. Why is it shaped that way? Because it seemed like it should be shaped that way. I don't know why. I just sort of decided, okay, it's got kind of a squarish shape. That's the tower. And then it's got this building here. And this little covered area here is kind of like a ramp that comes down into the other side of the city for the guards. And then the main area spills out there. By the way, this area of a city that is outside the gates is generally what they call a foregate area. Generally, when people came to the city to trade, those like farmers and the less wealthy people who came to trade, they couldn't afford to stay in the city center. So outside the gates or they didn't want to be bothered. So outside the gates of the city, hey, DM Fendak, who said, just started watching, first thing I hear, why the fuck not? Yep, that's how I think. So what you would get is you would get all of these lodgings and stables. And actually, just to point out the level of detail that kind of goes into this, not that I need to prove that any further, but here is a stable. You can tell it's got a big open area and it's got these little wooden roofed. I'm not sure. It's kind of tough to get it to focus to such a degree. But this is actually a stable. In my brain, as I was drawing this, I'm like, hey, that's a stable. This is a market. There's some sort of statue-y thing in the middle. And these columns, it's got just this decorative stuff. This here is a cemetery. Yeah, there's that. And then this is like a really slum area, but I really wish my card had a little bit better or my camera had a little bit better resolution at really low. O-Dog is saying need macro lens for that. Um, yeah, I'm gonna look into if people really enjoy this stuff. I might I know there's a bunch of people out there now who stream their game prep, and I kind of explained why that wasn't gonna be a thing I would do, but I do love sitting around and mapping, so I would be more than willing to just sit and stream like mapping a dungeon, mapping an overworld, mapping a city, whatever. So if this goes well, I'm probably gonna keep at it. Okay. So we're going to go ahead now and we are going to make the towers and the wall permanent. Okay. And whenever you're drawing in ink, because you can't go back and erase, the key is that I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Okay. If you're imagine that we're actually looking down at a city from above, which is essentially what you're doing when you're looking at a map. You know, the highest points, the highest points of the city need to be drawn first because they're going to get in the way of the lower points. So I'm not going to ink the walls first because the towers are the highest point. Arl Ritchie is saying, what's the map scale? Who the fuck knows? I don't know. All right, hold on a second. I would say that it's got to be about... So 1/16 of an inch is about 5 to 10 feet. We'll say 10 feet. So I don't know. A 1/16 of an inch is 10 feet. So wait, there's 16/16 of an inch. So an inch is probably an inch is 150 feet. 160 feet. That seems a little bit small. I don't know. Oh, Richie, I was just messing with you, man. It was he said just wondering if you had something in mind. Gee, sorry. I don't work like that. That ain't how angry flies. This is the way I'm mapping is I'm mapping what looks good to my eye. Okay. Now clearly there's some buildings. Whoops. There's some buildings over here. That are about Oh, R.L. Ritchie saying, I'm just curious about the tactical placement of these watchtowers, for archery or whatever. It's actually funny that you say that because I did sort of, when I laid them out, I did sort of have a maximum distance in between the towers in mind. And you can see that none of the towers are more than 2 inches apart on my original plan. But I also didn't get to that level of detail because the city also has magical defenses, including statues that live in the city walls and can be brought to life because the city was founded by a artificer. Her name was Esri Fahima, and she was an expert at artifice magic. Her thing was like animated statues and sculpture and stuff. So like I said, there is a lot of history to the city. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to ink in the towers. And we do it exactly the same way that we did it with the circle template, or with the pencil, except we're going to be much more careful about it. Now, notice it's kind of hard to see, but notice that there is the black little point of the Sharpie is... Ali RPG is saying, well, holy crap details. Yeah, I ran a campaign in this city for two years. I know all the details. So anyway, the point of this marker, or the point of this pen, is actually a lot smaller than the metal bit that houses the pen. Like, I'm actually going to go ahead and draw a diagram, because this is actually way super important. Okay, this again, if you're really concerned about mapping good, this is something that you want to understand. And the other thing is that if you're going to use a thick Sharpie marker, Do not put it directly on something you value because it will soak through paper. Okay, so if you look closely at the tip of the pen, the actual tip of the pen is this black felty part, and then there's a metal part, and then there's the bottom of the pen. Okay? A template actually has some thickness to it. I'm working upside down. But a template has some thickness to it. Okay? And when you work on the tiny scale that I'm willing to work on, there is a major difference between working straight down into the template and working so that you're working at an angle so that the tip of the pen bumps up against the edge of the template, and the actual point of the pen, the point that it's making contact with the paper, there's a little bit of a gap there. Okay? So when you're actually going to work with a template or a ruler or anything, you want to try and work straight down into the template. Oh, this is the wrong pen. I keep grabbing the wrong pen, and eventually that's going to fuck me up. Okay. So, we're going to put our template down, and you're going to see that I'm going to go straight down into the template. Wow, my hands are shaky as hell tonight. Okay. So I'm going to go straight down into the template like that, so that it's as accurate as possible. The Immortal DM says, ... your diagrams. Oh, I assume that you're Pete, guys, you're not allowed to swear in my streams. This is a no swearing stream. I'm the only one that's allowed to swear. So I actually did purposely turn on the language filter as a joke. Okay. And then we're going to line up the second template, because now we have the inner circle, the 3/16 of an inch. And we're going to go ahead and add that circle. And then we're going to go in and we're just going to very lightly fill in the gap. And that's how we get the thickness of the tower. Now, O-Dog is saying your hands are huge. You're right. You know what they say about a dude with really big hands? Okay, and we're going to fill in the second one. And we're going to do... Actually, you know what? It's kind of funny because I've never watched my hands that closely on video. And I am actually becoming self-conscious about them. I'm like, wow, God, my hands are huge and hairy. My skin is terrible. I have this gash along my hand. I don't know where that came from. No. Everybody in the chat is saying big gloves, large gloves, big hands. No. He has a huge penis. That's what they say. Huge penis is the answer. And we're going to go ahead and ink the other tower. And the other tower we're not going to worry about too much right now because that is going to serve as the anchor point for the... Oh, wait. Before I ink the other tower, the last thing I want to do is I want to get the center line out of that tower to the next tower. Because once you put the... Sorry, I have my pen in my mouth. Because once you put the ink down, it's much harder to pick up that center line. So when I start the next section of the wall, I'm going to want to build I'm going to want to build from that section of the, I have a center line to start me off. Okay, and again, we're just going to lay out the last tower there. Am I still on the camera? I still am on the camera. This is kind of working out, huh? Okay. That one's a little bit off, but that's okay. Okay. Here's another thing with mapping, particularly with ink, that is very important. Never draw from right to left. Okay? It takes ink a little time to dry. So if I were to draw an ink line right now, and then, actually these Sharpie pens do dry pretty well, but there's a little bit of a smudge there. So if I drew something here, and then I start drawing something over here, I'm going to smudge it with the meat of my hand, and I'm going to leave these streaks along my map. So you kind of always want to work that way. Um. Oh yeah, God, that whole penis thing. I just realized because somebody has me on Chromecast and everybody in the house is watching. I think they said. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and fill in. We're gonna do the sections of the city wall here. Okay, and again, remember, same deal. We want to try and work as close to straight down as we can, which is a little bit harder because my ruler is a little bit too thick compared to the point of my pen. Now, in order to give the line some thickness, what I've been doing in this case, rather than, drawing something that's offset, I just move the ruler a little bit and then do a second line so that it's just a double thick line. There's nothing super fancy about that. Okay? And then the other nice reason to have your towers have some thickness is so that it's easy to not overshoot when you're drawing in the line. Otherwise there's a chance you overshoot and then you get a little bit of a blob that comes out into the tower. So the towers having some thickness helps out. Now I'm going to break the rule about rotating the paper here because normally what I would do here, in fact, I'm not. Okay, don't bump the camera, actually. All right, guys, prepare for momentary motion sickness. All right. Okay, because again, remember what I said, you always want to have your paper in an orientation where you're drawing along the natural curve of your wrist or the natural hinge of your wrist. Okay, not as important right now because I'm drawing a straight line. Whoops, I wasn't even close there. That line kind of sucks. Because you're trying to be as vertical as you can, or in this case, when you come into the ruler, kind of hard to, let me bump up on the pen. You can actually come in with a little bit of an angle away from the ruler, because that'll still prevent the ruler from making your line offset. You can't come in from this side, because then the corner of the ruler will make your line off. But you can come in from this side, and you'll get as close to the ruler as you can where the pen hits the paper. It is also extremely important to hold your ruler steady. Man, I really do wish I had had a drink tonight. All right, I'm not super happy with how that came out, and it looks a little bit too narrow. But that's fine. That's fine. All right, so now the city walls, which kind of serve as where our little neighborhood is going to start. Yeah, you can see how that tower is or that city wall is a little bit tapered. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fake it with some thickness to the line. Just going to go over the line a little bit. Now it just looks like whoever was drawing this map pressed a little bit too hard with the pen or whatever, was a little bit off. So it's got kind of that little bit of an off feel, but the width of the wall doesn't suddenly look odd. Also because there's going to be another one of these fortresses over here. That's going to help if things aren't 100% symmetrical. So now we're going to go ahead, and I'm actually going to just do a little bit of just a quick pencil line here, because this is where my fortress is going to be, right? That's where the gate to the city is going to be. Okay, and that's important because now the next thing I want to do is sort of figure out where the main roads are. And I've already decided where the main roads are, right? You can see them drawn in green here. I'm also going to do the coastline of the we're just going to quickly, coastlines are nice. You just kind of draw a little bit. Let's kill the light so that you can see better. Turn off. Why won't you turn off? There we go. Okay. All right. So coastlines are nice because you draw just a nice little wobbly line. It doesn't actually even need to be good. The sketch at least doesn't have to be good. We can decide exactly where it's going to be as we ink it in. So, but at least now we have just that little segment there. And actually, I don't quite like that because I kind of want the river to have a little bit of bendiness to it. Now, I'm not trying to draw both sides of the river at this point. Whatever happens on this side of the river is going to be pretty much a uniform width. So I'm just going to, when I come back to this side of the city, I'm going to go ahead and mirror it. Okay, I actually could have started on this side of the city, but we're going up here now. Okay, now what do I know about what's going on here on this section of the city? First of all, we've got a bridge here, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and take my pencil, and I'm going to say, okay, there's where the bridge is going to be, right? Because if you look at the way I've handled the bridges, where's the other sections of the map? Here we go. Okay. Gonna kind of let you in on a secret here. That I don't actually draw roads. Okay? You'll notice if you look very closely at this map, even though you can see roads and alleys and bridges and all sorts of, places where people walk and plazas and things, all of that stuff is negative space. Okay? Except for this here, which I decided I needed an avenue that had trees going down the middle of it or shrubs and plants going down the middle of it. But the roads themselves are just the spaces between the buildings. Okay? Which means when you're going to have a bridge, you don't need to draw the bridge right away, but you do need to leave a space where the bridge is going to connect up. Like that's not the best example, because those are the canals, and the canals have a little bit of thickness to them. Okay, here's a good example. This is the, what am I looking at? Okay, so this is the bridge from Swallow's Bluff to Sea-Watch, which are the different... By the way, hold on. By the way, the city does have neighborhoods. There it is. Okay. Swallows Bluff, Minstrel's Ward, Perfumed Row, Dragon's Gate, yada, yada, yada. Okay. There you go. Anywho. So this bridge is just negative space like anything else, but it was very important that I knew where it was before I drew the coastline, because the coastline has to stop and leave a space for the bridge to connect to. And one of the reasons why my bridges have these posts at either end is because it makes it easier to hide those stopping points, especially if they don't look great. So anyway, I just want to know where about the bridge is going to be, and we're just going to work. Okay. The other thing I know is that here in this area, you can't quite see it on that map. It doesn't show through. There you go. Can you read it? I don't know if you can read the text under there, but this is a market area. So this is built around a big kind of a market plaza. And I'm just going to outline that because a market plaza, again, a big open air market is just an open negative space. Okay? But the reason that I'm filling in these things is because they sort of represent the endpoints of your roads. Okay? Major roads connect features of your city. So, for example, once we know that there's a market here and a gate there, we know that there is a main road that connects the market to, because goods come in from the gate and go to the market. There's a bridge here which connects different neighborhoods of the city, and there's a market here. So we know that there's going to be a road that kind of connects it, right? And actually, I want this road to have a little bit more of a curve and then straighten out. Okay. Now again, we're just filling this in lightly in Alley RPG. What is that odd oval thing off the side of the bridge? I have to look. This thing? That's an island. That's just a chunk of that's a chunk of unused island land. Just because I felt like it needed a little chunk of unused island land there. There's a few islands in the bay that this city is built around. There's actually, it's kind of hard to see on this again. Um, well, can't figure out how to tilt it. So this is a sort of a rocky hill island with a druid circle on the top. Don't know why, but it turned out that there was a druid circle there. Um, and then the other thing is that we know that there, because we sketched it in, is that there's a road that runs along the coast. Okay? So now that kind of tells us where our main roads are in this neighborhood that we're working in. Okay, those are the big roads. Those are the main thoroughfares that all the big travel is that better or worse? That's worse. All the big travel is going to go through. But now our city is also divided into neighborhoods, okay? And in this particular case, we've got a couple of different neighborhoods, and we're going to be working on this residential neighborhood here. And maybe we'll do the park and the shops, but definitely the residential neighborhood. And most neighborhoods tend to be sort of divided from each other by roads. So, like, now we're going to try and fill in some of the more minor roads. Okay? And this is... I'm just killing the light again. And this is sort of... This is where you just sort of start to dick around. Okay? So, for example, this is a park. This here is a park. And the reason why I wanted the road to have a little bit of a curve is because parks and park neighborhoods tend to be, at least in my brain, they tend to have sort of curvy shapes. They tend to look more, more organic and more natural, at least in their basic shape. Yeah, I mean, you can have parks that are walled in or whatever, but I like the parks to have a sort of a curvy feel to them. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that there is a road that runs around the park just like that. Again, I don't know if you can see it. So, and now in here, this area is going to become our park. Okay? Now again, because we're going to need... Now we have a residential neighborhood, and we have good shops. We're probably going to want a road that just cuts those districts apart. And it would make sense if the road intersected that main road. Again, because it's a side street. Not, it's not a little alley, but at the same time, it's just sort of, it's an alternate way to travel. The market area and the fine shops area can kind of butt into one another because the market area tends to be surrounded by shops and the shops get better and better as you go in this direction, so there doesn't necessarily need to be a road there. And again, you're gonna find that as we're gonna keep working in finer detail until we get down to like all the little alleys and fiddly bits. But for right now, we're gonna assume that there is a good road that divides this residential neighborhood from the shops. And finally, roads tend to also follow city walls. So I'm going to assume that there's a road here. I'm going to assume that there are residences actually built right up against the wall in this case. And then there is a road that kind of runs parallel there. And I'm also going to say, well, obviously you need to have tower access. So there's going to be some sort of a road or there's going to be some sort of open area that allows that tower to be accessed. And then dividing this shops and inns, this merchant area from the residences, we're probably going to have one more road there. Okay. And then we're going to have an open area. And now that I'm looking at it, we're going to have a fortress here and we're going to have a tower here. So we're going to assume that there's a big open area like a practice ground or some sort of a plaza right here. That sort of makes the corner of that. Okay. So now you can kind of see that we've got this basic sense of the layout of this area of the city. Okay. Now, it comes down to, like, as I was saying before, You sort of notice as you look at different areas of the city that you get a sense of like population density and stuff. Okay, so like I'm having trouble tilting this. There you go. So this is an example of middle class or average residential neighborhood, and you get a sense of the sort of size that that has, right? Um, given given an inch of space, you're gonna have. I mean, if they're all built up close together, in an inch of space, you're gonna have what? If I was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably no more than 10 buildings to an inch. All right, which makes the buildings probably 30 or 40 feet, which is good. Um, but because this is also built in a wealthier area, because you can see from the fine shops, the wealthy district, the parkland, the riverland, this is probably a little bit more of an expensive area, that we're probably getting into a population density more like that. So what I now start to do is I start to just sort of break up this area into blocks, okay? Based on the size, and there's no real rhyme or reason to this other than I just start sort of connecting roads. So like, clearly it's weird that this road just sort of ends here. So this road would probably continue through to there, right? Um, and this road, actually that road's a little bit too tight. So there's probably another main road there. It doesn't really split this neighborhood. It just goes through the neighborhood. Um, I guess we'll just start to work in this area here. Okay. So given that we're dealing with buildings that are about yay big, you can sort of start to see that there's probably they're probably closely spaced together, So, and remember that just like in SimCity, no one's going to live in a building if they can't get to travel. So we're just going to start to sort of figure out how tightly packed the buildings have to be to fill in the space, if you see what I'm saying. Okay? And this is so much of just doodling and just sort of imagining like what it would be like. It's just sort of, this is the Zen part. This is the part where you just sort of lose yourself in your head and you just start bouncing buildings around. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's good. I'm not super happy with that, but we can come back in and fix it when we start to ink. Meanwhile, here I'm gonna start to work in sort of in sort of blocks. Okay, so these are blocks of buildings, and I will, and then we'll split them up into actual buildings. And now here I've created this sort of interesting little space, so wouldn't it be nice if there was some sort of tree or something there? Because it's your world, and if you say that there's a happy little tree right there in that particular space, who's going to tell you that there isn't? And so we can have a little bit of that. Actually, I guess we could have that block just kind of complete there. And we're just kind of playing around and we're seeing what shapes we like. And, I'm going to guess the houses closest to the park are probably going to be the biggest. And over here, because there's a couple of this area is going to be wealthy houses. So, these houses are probably a little bit bigger too. Yeah, so I just kind of, we got that. Okay, kind of like that. Okay, and we're just like sort of doodling in. Okay. And while we're here, we might as well go ahead and we can fill in the more residential area too, because we'll decide that we've got some, because the houses on the other side of the street probably match up. And again, these are going to be bigger houses. So they're probably just going to form sort of a block. Little bit of space between each house, because the more money you have, the more space you want. You think about it logically, you don't want to be near your neighbors if you can avoid it, because people suck. And so it's a luxury of not being near your neighbors. That's why wealthier people surround their houses by more and more space. And then up here along the wall, this is, obviously this is just going to be blocks of houses, so we don't even really need to doodle much there. We just sort of see that that's going to be blocks of houses. And there you go. Okay. So now, once we kind of like that, once we kind of like the shapes that we've laid out there, we start looking into those shapes and start kind of dividing them up into particular buildings. Okay, and it's like, okay, those 3 buildings. And the buildings themselves are rectangular, but they're gonna, obviously they're gonna meet at various angles and stuff. And you can have buildings that aren't rectangles also. But most residential buildings are pretty simple rectangles, unless they're unless they're like richer residential buildings, or alternatively, like shops and stuff and inns especially can have more elaborate shapes to them. Okay, and you can see that now as I'm filling this in, I'm kind of realizing that, well, this whole block is sort of at an angle. It kind of has to be. That's just how it kind of ended up. Again, not really any particular reason for this stuff other than this is what's coming out of my pencil as I draw. Okay, which, believe it or not, for all of the planning that is going into this map, and it is true of just about anything, a lot of what ends up on paper is just a matter of what comes out of your pencil when you do it. See, I don't like how this angled area is coming together with sort of a rectangular area. So I'm going to go ahead and put one more house there. And I don't like this area at all. I just don't like how it's coming out. It's going to have to be a little bit. So I'm going to need, there we go. So I just sort of need buildings to sort of reestablish, sort of an orthogonal shape to it. And then we'll do a big building on this side. And this guy's got a yard. Okay, so this area is someone's yard. Somebody has a yard. Lucky them. Okay. And then finally, this block up here, we're just going to fill in some big building, And actually, these houses are a little bit... This area is turning out not to be as wealthy as I thought because the size of the houses is coming out a little bit smaller, but that's okay. And we can get a house in there. Okay, and now you can sort of see where all of these little buildings are. Look at that. Okay, and then I've got these buildings here. And... Yep, and we're going over here. Because these, again, this is a less... Because now we're starting to butt up into... What is under there? Inns and taverns and shops. Okay. So basically lodgings and commercial. So yeah, the people who live in those houses, they're not as well off because they don't want to... because they ended up living next to sort of more noisy businesses and stuff. And that guy's in an alley, sort of in an alley there. And then along the wall, we're going to go ahead and just fill in some houses that are just about the right size that I want. There's a little bit of space behind the wall there. That's actually kind of cool because you sort of wonder what's going on in that little alleyway there. It's just some space at the back of the building, so some guy, or someone has space behind their house, that they can do stuff with. Who knows? Like I said, residential areas are the most boring, but they're the easiest to start with. Because in the end, it just amounts to a whole bunch of rectangles. And I'm still not quite happy with what's going on here. It's fine. It's fine. You know what? That's what I want to do. I just want to split that into 2 houses. And then we'll shift that one a little bit closer to the street. And actually, what I'm going to do, what I've suddenly decided, is that since this is the corner where the park is, that maybe the park has just sort of an odd shape to it. Okay, so maybe there's something in the park. Maybe there's like a little monument or something here. We can have a statue garden or something that sort of explains that. But we'll just kind of fix it with the shape of the park. Okay. Mad Adventure is saying, I wonder if there's a new town section or an old town section. There actually is. This area here, which is why I have been avoiding touching it, is the oldest section of the town. This is where the city was founded. This is more recently built up, but I really want this section of the city to have a different. You can't quite see it because it's a little bit off the map, but this section of the city is going to have a slightly different feel to it. And then the city sort of expanded out toward the river, across the bay. There is an old city and a new city. This, I'm still kind of going with the old city mentality here because it's easier to draw, and I haven't quite decided what the new city is. Okay. Once we have the buildings laid out that we like in that section, you've got a couple of choices. You can either fill in a whole bunch of sections at once, or you can start inking. And I'm going to go ahead and just start inking in this residential neighborhood to sort of finalize it so that we can move on. Okay. And the way I ink is, again, sort of just the Zen approach. Okay. I am going to show off. I'm going to go ahead and grab a blank piece of paper so that I can demonstrate some fine detail. Before I move on. Okay. So, buildings can have a couple of different roof types. Okay, and it's kind of cool to vary them up, but some of them are more complicated than others. And as you're inking, you want to fill in. You start to fill in the roofs, and I've used a couple of different roof structures in this city. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do a roof, but so the easiest is just the normal sort of line down the middle, which would indicate just a normal peaked or pitched roof. Simple as that. Okay. You can actually get a little bit more elaborate if you want to, and do one of those things, and that actually is more of a sort of semi-pyramidal roof where there's a little bit of taper in from the front. Okay? Those are a bit more of a pain in the ass to draw, especially when you're trying to draw a friggin' building that's a 1/16 of an inch wide. So I don't tend to do those too much, but occasionally it's good to sort of vary things up. In addition, you can do, like, I've got some, what have I got here? Oh, okay. I've got this, which is just that's the totally peaked roof there. I'm not the best at drawing these things, but there you go. But there you go. So like a peaked roof, sort of a pyramid style roof. And then the other thing is that when the buildings have an interesting shape to them, you kind of have to figure out where the roofs are going to come together. So normally with a building like this, let me get a new piece of paper because we'll talk about. And the only reason I'm doing it at this size is because it's kind of hard to see that level of detail. Okay. So when you've got, oh, I forgot. Okay. Then there's also the simple one, which is a flat roof. And there's also a wooden roof. Simple as that. The reason to use different roof styles is because if you were to start, like, if you drew your city as just like, you know, here's all my buildings and they all have the same roof. If you were to look at an entire goddamn city like that, especially a really tightly focused map, a really tightly detailed map, it sort of becomes hard to tell where the buildings end, where one building ends and another begins. That's why as we do roofs, we tend to use different styles, you know, just so that it's a little, or at least different orientations, just so that it's a little bit easier to tell where the buildings are in relation to one another. And it also just sort of breaks it up and makes it more interesting to look at. This gets boring. Now, one of the other things that I noticed after I worked on this friggin' map for a long time is that I had forgotten a really important thing. Most buildings, particularly medieval buildings, have one of these little suckers on them. That's a chimney. It was important for heating. It didn't become an issue in this. And also I should point out that some buildings will also have either like a smoke hole or a central chimney. Some buildings will have multiple chimneys, which, again, those things are sort of a pain in the ass to draw because they require you to kind of break up the building as you're drawing it. And what you really want to do is you really want to be able to draw the outline of a building and then just, throw a roof on it. Okay? Now, fortunately, my city is in a tropical location. Or at least a semi-tropical location. So heating becomes less of an issue. Obviously, they should still have chimneys for cooking, but I got way, way, way into drawing the city before I realized I wasn't putting chimneys on any of my buildings. Anyway, let's talk about differently shaped roofs. So there's a couple of different ways you can handle a building that comes together like this. So the first way is just to assume there's a peaked roof, just like... so that building would just sort of look like that, right? And simple as that. That's not really the best drawing of it, but whatever. You get what I'm saying there, okay? The other way to bring buildings together is to do an extension, okay? That's one of those suckers, okay? And in that case, let's see, how the hell would this... Right. Something like that. That's not the best drawing, but you can kind of see how that comes together. And obviously you have the same issue like if we were to build more complicated shapes, like we want to build a T-shaped building. We could again do it like that. I really can't see another way to do that. So, and then finally, you can have sort of the shed extension, where we do something like that. And that's clearly just a building that has like a smaller section on it. Bam, 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 bam. Like so. Roof, 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 roof. Okay? Simple as that. Again, this is a lot of thought that goes into really just drawing a whole bunch of rectangles with lines in them. But again, if you're here anyway, you're obviously here because you want to put in this level of detail. There's a couple of other things that I tend to do with roofs. So for example, couple of ways, like if you wanted to do universal religious structures, one of the ways is to make them a little bit elaborate to begin with, and so now we've got a cross-shaped building, kind of a typical church-type building. You can add a steeple onto the middle of the building. So now if you were to look at that building, yoink, yoink, user, right? That's about what you would get out of that building there, I think. Yeah, that's about what you would get out of that building, right? Typical steeple. Mad Adventure saying, got any drafting classes under your belt? As a matter of fact, yes. When I was in high school, way a long time ago, I guess in 1994, I did take a couple of architectural drawing classes, and in college, back in 97 or 98, I did do some mechanical engineering, so there was a lot of isometric drawing and stuff, which is how that's where you learn the sort of the three views in the isometric. So we've got the top of the building, you've got the front of the building, and then you've got the side of the building, which all comes together to create the actual building there. You know, that just standard, uh, standard, whatchamacallit. That's what they call an isometric. Or there's a three, I don't remember what it is. But anyway, that's off the topic. My point is just that as you're, because once we, oh, wait, one more thing. Fun fiddly bits. Every so often, it is also fun to give a building a little bit of an extra flair or flourish. And one of my favorites is dormer windows because they're so easy to just add to a building. The key with anything that you're going to add to a building, just to give it a little bit of detail, is that you don't want it to affect the lines of the building. You want it to be something that you could add on. So, for instance, we could assume that there's a covered set of stairs on the outside of the building. Okay, so now that's just a set of stairs that runs up or runs along the side of the building. There, I didn't do that right. Bam, 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 bam. Oh, set of stairs. Okay, running up the building, maybe to some sort of a porch, which has a little peaked roof on it, whatever. Okay. Another thing, dormer windows, my absolute favorite. Okay. Those are just the little peaked windows that stick off a building, just like that. Okay. That's a dormer window. Very easy to add because it's just a triangle and a line down the middle. You can actually add higher dormer windows if you want to too. Those are a little bit weirder, but you know, is that? Oh, I didn't quite do that right. There we go. There we go. So that's sort of a window that's more like an attic window. There, whatever. So you can just throw on these little things. The other thing you can add is we can add a yard to the outside of the building. So you put in a little fenced yard, and then we'll put some stuff in there. You know, I add a lot of stuff to things because it's just fun to add stuff. You know, and stuff is just like dots and little lines and stuff. And actually, as I draw them, I really do think about what stuff might be there. So like, I'm trying to find it. Like, here, that's really hard to see, but that person there is a dyer. Okay, they dye cloth. Because they've got dye vats in their backyard. Or not in their backyard, but in their yard. Okay? So, anywho. So once we have the buildings laid out where we want them to go, we can then take the pen from whose born mistakes will never return, and we can start inking in the buildings. And as we ink in the buildings, it's okay to change some of the details, okay? And again, I'm going to kind of work in ways where that sort of match the natural orientation of my hand. Now here, because this is a pretty much rectangular area with a slight angular variation to it, I don't have to rotate too much. But if I was working in an area where, say, there was a curved road, like, you know, a curved road and buildings all along it, like building, I would actually want to be rotating as I drew these buildings so that I could draw, you know, nice regular lines along the... Oh, wow, when I erase... Mad Adventure says, this is a fire pit, this is a barrel, this is a clapped out Chevy Nova. Yeah, basically. That's how, like, as I'm drawing this map, I just start to discover all these little details just by drawing them. So I'm just going to start right over here, and I'm just going to start dropping down buildings pretty much where I decided the buildings already were, more or less. I don't have to be 100% accurate to what I drew, and in fact, it's okay if I'm not. And you'll also notice that I do tend to give the front of buildings a little bit of variation, so they don't just automatically line up along the roads, which is total. It helps make it feel a little bit more real. You know, it's just the buildings were built a little bit haphazardly. That guy's got an alley. Good for him. He's probably got a tenant at the back. This right here, I don't Let me try to zoom in a little bit. Oh yeah, okay, okay. You can kind of watch the city appearing from my pen tip. Okay, and then now I'm breaking the rule a little bit because I should be rotating the map. This is a bit unnatural, and I have to lean in a weird way to get this to work. But that's okay. And I've decided that this guy's building, he's got sort of a fancy L-shaped building. And then that. And we'll give that guy an X, a peak roof. There you go. And now we'll go here. Now, we need to have enough space here in this little road area. So that building is a little bit smaller than I had originally decided it would be to allow traffic to get in there. And I am going to go ahead and add a little bit of just shrubbery to that corner so that that person maintains a little bit of a garden. Okay, they grow something. Okay, and then all of my roofs have the same orientation. That's not good. Put a little extension there. And actually, let me go ahead and I'm going to add a set of stairs there and a little bit of an outbuilding. So there's something a little bit more complicated going on in there. I don't know what that is. That's someone who they extended their house a little bit. They obviously refinanced, took out a line of credit and added some other stuff. There we go. And again, now we're just gonna add some other buildings here. And again, we're kind of going with where the pencil lines told us they should be, but we don't have to be exact. Because again, it's your world and you can do whatever you want in it. And now, because of the way, I'm going to leave that building out because, again, I still don't like the way this intersection is coming together. So once I lay down these other buildings in ink, I'm going to see if maybe I can't do something more interesting in there. No, we'll come back to it. I don't know, because I don't want to mess it up. This is the thing. Once you're working with the pen, everything becomes a lot more fearful. Because fixing a mistake with the pen involves going to the whiteout. And the whiteout is always noticeable if you look close. And you will see, like if you leave a mistake, if you have to correct a mistake and use the whiteout, you will always see it. Every time you look at the map, the first thing you're going to see is that spot where you fucked up and then you had to resort to the whiteout because you suck. Mapping is an emotional roller coaster, honestly. There's a lot of self-esteem issues involved in mapping. I'm going to decide that I'm not sure what's going on there. That guy's got a little bit of a flat roof going. That came out like shit. I should have turned the paper. It's fine. Now, for these little wealthier houses, you know what? We'll come back to the little wealthier houses in a second. Let's just fill in this area here. I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna rotate just a little bit. Doug says put in a well. Oh yeah, okay. That's a good idea. In this intersection, we're gonna put in not a well, but I'm gonna go ahead and put in an actual fountain. Okay, and again, because this is a little bit of a wealthier area, maybe we'll put a little stand of trees. Okay, so now there's a little stand of trees and there's a well there. The people gather there in that neighborhood. They hang out, they wash their clothes, they get together, they bullshit about the day. The kids play in the shade of the trees. They gather water for cooking at night. It's a nice little spot. It brings the neighborhood together. And because of the way this city was constructed, it's probably, like I said, it's a fountain, and there is some sort of a statue of a fantastic creature, feeding the fountain, maybe a naiad. So that's naiad. That's the naiad's court now. which is what the locals call it. It's just the place around the Naiad statue where they get together and hang out. Yeah, so that's nice. One of the things about this city is that it it is magically protected by the power of Esri Fahima, who vanished, by the way. She's gone. Nobody knows what happened to her. She vanished like 20 years ago, I think it was, or 20 years before the start of the game anyway, and kind of created this massive power vacuum in the city. But she had put all of these magical protections over the city. So one of the things that the city has is really good weather control. So the weather in the city is San Diego weather. Okay. It's basically, it's always nice. It's always, 72 degrees, with a pleasant breeze coming right off the ocean. You know what? Maybe we'll even, like, in this little plaza, we'll put a couple of little benches. Yeah, little benches. Which, now, I see benches, you probably just see lines. Okay? But people sit there. There's this whole cute little thoroughfare there. Okay? Yep. Now, this area has ended up being a little bit less populous than I had anticipated, which is fine. That's fine. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start filling in these more wealthy houses. And the thing with the wealthy houses is that they're bigger. But we can also give them more elaborate shapes. Like maybe we'll do one of these little... I like that. I like those buildings that have sort of that, what is that, like a C shape? And then we'll put some buildings along this road here. It's got sort of a porch there going, and then one here. This area is actually not using its space very efficiently, and I'm going to put more trees in this area here. So between those houses, again, because there is a park there. In fact, let's go ahead and Imperial Star Destroyer says it really tied the neighborhood together. The dude just wanted the fountain back. Okay, we're gonna go ahead now and we're gonna put in the park, and we're gonna. Now the thing with parks is you can do almost anything you want, but I'm gonna do sort of well, first we've got this sort of squared off area at the head of the park. So I'm going to assume that there's actually some sort of a monument there. And we're going to go ahead and assume that there's a little stone wall. And at the center, there's some sort of statue or monument that represents something. Okay? And that sort of, we don't know yet what that is. The rest of the park, we're going to just sort of make it a nature park because I'm going to show you how to do grass and nature now. And maybe we're going to put a little pond in the park. There's a pond. How nice. It's got a little pond. Okay. Then we're going to decide, because a nature park is going to have little like walking trails that you walk on. So we're going to say there's a trail there. And they tend to just be sort of like bubbly. Oh, and maybe here at the center, maybe there's a plaza there. There's, and then, this is going to come together. And then, I don't know. I guess there should be another trail here. I guess there doesn't need to be. Okay. Nah, it's fine. It's fine. Okay. Because most of what you do in a park is just going to be in the fine detail. I just realized how there's not a whole lot of population here. So the houses aren't small, but it's not dense either. So it's a nice little neighborhood. Okay. Once we have the general layout, once again, I tend to work in pen to do the detail work, just because I'm brave. So we're going to go ahead and ink in the pond. And the way we do water, let me switch to the big paper for a second here. So this is how you do a coastline. Okay, if you want to do water, at least this is how I do water. So I start with a hard line that sort of wobbles back and forth a little bit. And that's your coastline. And obviously one side is going to be the water and one side is going to be the land. Now, the way I do the water on the other side is that um, basically I just sort of copy the coastline, but pick my pen up and down. So I'm just sort of bouncing the pen up and down. And I usually do that twice. Okay? So that didn't come out that great because so let's do it again. And then we just copy the coastline, sort of parallel it. Not quite the same, and we bounce the pen up and down to create sort of this broken line. Okay? And then, like in some places, if it looks thin, you can add a little bit extra. Okay? So what we're going to do, now, I realize that we're working in a really tiny space here. We're working in this little tiny pond. But we're still going to go ahead and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to copy the line and we're just going to bounce our pen up and down a little bit and just fill in the water. Okay? If I wasn't working in a pond, it would be a little bit easier to see. Now, in addition, we're also going to go ahead and we're going to create the monument. And I'm not quite sure what this monument is, but I gave it sort of a cloverleaf shape. So it looks like it could, and that's really hard to see, but it looks like it could be a statue from above or some sort of something. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to fill in the wall around it. Okay, and we're just going to, and I'm actually just going to give it a little bit of a double thick line to make it look like a wall. And then right here outside of it, I'm going to put a couple of little lines here to indicate that they're like benches on the outside of it. Now, as far as the parkland itself, parkland is really just trails and grass. And you're kind of tricking people, you're kind of trying to trick people into seeing grass. And I'm going to show you exactly how we're going to do that now. What we're going to do is we're just going to put the edge of the grass here by just, let me do the big thing. Okay. So I have an area that I want to be grassland or I want it to be nature is what I'm going to call it. Okay? And all you really need to do is just sort of go around it and make it look fuzzy. Okay? This isn't the best fuzziness, but you make it look fuzzy, and then when people look at that, especially then if you go ahead and just add little dots and maybe add a few shrubs or whatever. And you sort of, the reason I scribble into the shrubs is so that they don't look like, that's like popcorn. That's a kid drawing a cloud. That does not look like shrubbery. Okay? If you really want to draw good shrubbery, you've got to get really fine like lines. Okay? And really irregular lines. But at the same time, that's sort of a pain in the ass to do, especially when you're working tiny. So you can sort of make up for it by just sort of scribbling at the edges. Okay? And then when someone looks quick at it, they're just going to see this sort of irregular shrubbery. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to assume that this is an area of grassiness. And I'm just going to kind of trace out that area. See that? Grass. And then we're going to go ahead and trace out this area in grass. And see how I'm leaving that big open space because I decided that there's a plaza there? And then we're going to go ahead and trace out this area. And again, notice that the trail through the park, or the path through the park, is just the negative space between the fuzzy that makes the grass. Simple as that. Okay? Now we can decide that near our pond, we're going to add some shrubs, right? Not too many because then it's hard to tell the difference between the shrubs and the pond, but that's okay. And we'll add some more shrubs over here. And then we're just going to fill it in with some randomly placed dots because randomly placed dots makes it look like natural terrain, whereas that straight, flat, open space makes it look like, manufactured space. Okay, and then in the center here, I'm going to go ahead and fill in some little lines there, because there's clearly just a circle of benches in the middle of that little area. Okay? Now we're done with this neighborhood. Okay? And so I'm going to show off the last part that you do to finalize an area. Okay? Now I've got to be really careful, because I would actually normally work in a bigger space, but I wanted to work simple and tiny because I wanted to show off a lot of concepts. And the next time I do this, I will probably go a little bit more rapid fire and explain a little bit less, because I've covered a lot of ground tonight. But so the thing that we want to do now is we can go ahead and start getting rid of our pencil lines. Okay, so we're going to take our black pearl eraser and we're going to get rid of the pencil lines that we no longer need. Okay, so for example, okay, this is going to be problematic because this is going to shake the hell out of the table. So it's going to get earthquakey for a minute. Okay, these walls on this side of the river, they're done. And I'm also going to tell you, this is a place where I kind of screwed up, because the longer you leave a pencil line on a piece of paper, the harder it is to get rid of it. Okay. So the pencil lines here, those guidelines, I haven't worked on this map in months. So those pencil lines have been there for a long time now. And fortunately, I'm still getting rid of them. It's all good. The other thing is that you want to be careful the direction in which you erase. Okay, when you are near the edge of a piece of paper, you do not want to erase perpendicular to that edge, or what you're going to do is bunch up the paper. Okay? You always want to work parallel to the edge of the paper. And even then, you kind of want to splay your fingers out along the edge, because even when you work parallel to the paper, you can sort of start it to bunch up. So you hold the paper in place and erase between your fingers. Okay? It seems like such a little thing, but it's a real shame to work for hours and hours on a map and then rip the paper with the eraser or crumple the paper with the eraser, which I have done more times than I can count. Okay? Notice again that my general mode is I splay my fingers out and erase between my fingers, and if I'm near the edge of the paper, I'm always erasing parallel to the edge. Okay? The other thing to be really careful of is I'm not going to start erasing this area yet, because that's the area I just drew. And remember I said it takes ink longer to set? You don't want to erase an area where the ink hasn't set yet, because if you do that, like even I think here, no, okay. Like if you erase over an ink line, fortunately, I mean, these Sharpie pens are really good. So they kind of set pretty quickly. But you can still sort of ruin a line if you try to erase it too soon. You get these black smudges or black clouds. So you tend to work in one area, then start doing the guidelines for another area, then ink another area, and then go back and erase a previous area, so that you're kind of rotating through the different tasks. And you also want to be careful where you erase. Like this guideline is dead. I don't need that anymore. I'm never going to have to extend that section of the wall. But this area here, I still need all of those lines. Those are going to help me start the next section of wall. These lines here, they tell me where other neighborhoods are. Okay, and in fact, I probably shouldn't even be erasing the coastline, but that's okay. The coastline is easy enough to fill in. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that, just so that you can see, once you get rid of those pencil lines, what emerges is a really clean looking little map underneath there. Okay, if you look at that, that now looks clean, deliberate. All that sketchiness, all the fogginess, all the maybe here, all of that disappears when you erase those pencil lines and you have those buildings firm and set in stone. Again, I'm not really happy with how that neighborhood came out. I think the fact that I was trying to demonstrate was a little bit of a detriment. But while I'm here, I'm actually going to do something really brave, and I am going to fill in the coast without having sketched it at all. And it's that sort of shit that will always land you in trouble. It's like, oh, I can just draw this in. Okay? But there you go. There's the river. The edge of the river there. And remember that when you look at this map too, you're not going to be looking at it like... Zooming in to this extent really shows off how by hand that it is done. It's only when you kind of pull back to sort of the height that a human being would look at it that you start to see that it starts to look okay. Okay? The thing was not meant to be scrutinized at that level of detail. Otherwise, you'll start to see that, like, you know, well, let us not... I was going to point with an open pen. Like you can see, these little benches here, those are not even remotely straight, and those are ridiculously sized benches. You know, if you consider that this tiny building is probably at least 15 or 20 feet on a side, that makes this bench like 15 feet long, which actually, okay, I guess that's not ridiculous, but whatever. You know, my point is just that when you really start to, if you look at it to that degree, you're going to notice the difference. It's only kind of when you sort of step back and look at it from a normal height that's like, oh, that looks really good. It loses that level of detail. Or, you know. Anyway, I do like this little neighborhood. It's not entirely as nice as I would have liked, but it's a good introductory point. Also, you'll notice that I did fill in the bridge, the strut of the bridge, and I'm going to go ahead and fill in the other strut of the bridge. And I always rectangle off the edge of the bridge so that I can figure out where the two struts would be. Okay, otherwise, if I didn't do that, you end up in this situation where, like, I'll show you a for instance on the whole bridge thing. Okay, so, and I drew my coastline. I ended at a piece of a bridge. Okay, and I know the bridge is going to go off in this direction. Now I'm going to pick up the coastline somewhere else. Okay, now something's very wrong there. Okay, you can see it. Even, you know, you don't have to be looking at it that close to see that that bridge is fucked up. Okay, because those two posts just do not align. And the eye can be very good at noticing those details. So when I do a bridge, I always come to a rectangular end so that I can make sure that, and I didn't do that very well, so that I can make sure that in the end, it's going to look good. You know, otherwise, the eye sees that, and it's going to be, somebody screwed that bridge up. That thing's going to fall. People are going to die. You know? So, and the other trick with mapping is never assume you're going to remember to do anything later. Okay? So the reason I wanted to fill in the other side of that bridge is because I do not want to be doing the rest of the coastline, you know, in a week, and then all of a sudden forget to end where that coastline is supposed to end. Okay, or have it come in wrong. And actually, those little bridge struts, they're not as bad as they look because of the blurriness. Anywho,